Ethan had just unlocked Leo's enclosure when the lion burst out, eagerly kissing and licking his face. The crowd was astounded by the lion's affectionate response, and some spectators were moved to tears upon learning the reason behind it. As usual, the animal park was bustling with visitors on the weekend, with groups ranging from young students to adults observing various animal exhibits. Suddenly, a young man strode directly towards the lion enclosure, entered, and opened one of the cages. The onlookers barely took notice until a young lion leaped from its confinement. Given the vigor with which the lion cub sprang free, many braced for a horrific scene. Instead, the lion was overjoyed at the sight of the young man, pouncing on him as playfully as a kitten. There was no need to question whether the lion recognized him. Their close embrace and the lion's continuous affectionate nuzzling of his face spoke volumes. "Why would a lion cub kiss a human being like that?" a young boy asked in astonishment. "Aren't lions and humans enemies?" another little girl asked. No one was prepared for the touching story of the young man and the lion. Just then, a keeper came closer and prepared to explain everything he knew about Ethan Richardson and his beloved cats. 35-year-old Ethan was a geographer who had also become a part-time zookeeper about a year earlier. He had come into the lives of some lion cubs, forever changing his and their destiny. It was a cool Friday morning, and Ethan went to bask in nature and enjoy the fresh air of the Mexican plains. He was drifting into a slumber when he spotted some small animals that he couldn't quite identify. The animals were huddled together as they moved farther from the jungle and toward the plains where Ethan sat. Without thinking, the young man got up from his lounging position and walked towards the seemingly helpless animals. Ethan was almost sure that they were just kittens or puppies. However, when he crouched beside the animals, he discovered that they were neither domestic dogs nor cats. Ethan was surprised to see that the three small creatures in front of him were lion cubs. He quickly stood up and checked around to make sure their mother wasn't lurking around and waiting to do something funny. When he didn't see anything, he went back to the three lion cubs to examine them. It seemed that the cub in the middle was resting its weight on the other two, so Ethan tried to separate them so he could see if anything was wrong. Well, he discovered more than that. As he moved the cubs apart, he found out that the lion in the middle wasn't the only one that needed support. They were all looking very weak and their eyes were blurry with exhaustion, although the one in the middle looked like it was in the worst shape. The three of them were resting on each other because they were too frail to stand by themselves. As he patted them gently, Ethan made a decision right then and there. He called the Animal Rescue Center, and they reached him in a few minutes. Ethan followed their van to the center and waited for the three cubs to be examined. After about 40 minutes of waiting, one of the doctors, Dr. Blair, called for him. "They were born recently, but they are seriously dehydrated and generally malnourished," the doctor explained. Their mother must have abandoned them right after they were born. Ethan felt even more pity for the cubs as he imagined how helpless they must have felt before he found them. "Will they be all right?" he asked the doctor. "One of them will need more intensive treatments because he seems to have a fracture in one of his limbs. The wound is infected, but it's nothing to worry about. He'll be up and about in a few days," the vet replied, nodding. Ethan asked the doctor what they were planning on doing with the cubs once they were healed. Unfortunately, it looked like the closest animal sanctuary specialized in big cats was overbooked right now. The poor cubs would have to be separated, each of them going to a different facility. It wouldn't be the best choice for their development, but it was the only option the team had. However, Ethan proposed a different one. He offered to take all three cubs home with him to take care of them properly and raise them until they were old and strong enough to be released into a sanctuary or even in the wilderness. Of course, Ethan didn't just make his suggestion out of the blue. Taking care of wild creatures was sort of a familiar territory for him. He was familiar with the staff at the animal center because he had rescued other animals in the past, and some of these lived with them for a while before they were sent to the animal park or released back into their natural habitat. About 2 years earlier, Ethan was relaxing in the Mexican plains as usual when he found a sick baby monkey. After the monkey was treated for 2 weeks at the center, he still wasn't cleared to go back to the wilderness by himself, but the situation was similar. The closest sanctuaries didn't have room or time to care for another animal, and so Ethan took him home. Since this was the first animal to live with him, the experience was one of a kind. He had to learn to consider the playful monkey before he made any decision in the house, from where to place a new piece of furniture to what type of flowers to decorate the living room with. Although he had to take the monkey with him whenever he was going for a walk or to get groceries nearby, caring for him wasn't such an inconvenience for Ethan. He became so used to the monkey following him everywhere he went that when it was time to take him to the animal park, Ethan missed him dearly. But this time, he wasn't talking about a cute monkey. After thinking about Ethan's suggestion for a few minutes, the doctor had to be frank with him. Mr. Richardson, you know these are lion cubs, not regular kittens. They won't be so easy to take care of. However, Ethan was determined. He remembered how confused the cubs looked when he had first found them back on the plains. He realized that if he shied away from the challenge of raising them, he would be just like their mother, who abandoned them when they needed her most. If he left, the lion cubs would have to go through the pain of losing someone they bonded with all over again. The thought made Ethan insist on caring for the cubs in his house. Not having alternatives, the vet accepted, so he took the 2 cubs home that same day with the intent of bringing the 3rd one as well when he was fully treated. The first decision Ethan had to make was where to put the cubs since he had only 2 bedrooms. The guest room automatically became the lion's home. The former animals Ethan had raised stayed in the lounge, but it was the first time he had more than one foreign creature at his place, and he knew they would need more space. It took him just a few hours to set up the room and make it comfortable for the lions. He included the 3rd cub in his arrangements as he expected him to be fully well in a few days. However, things didn't go as the young man expected. When Ethan got to the animal center the next day to check up on the cub, the doctor informed him that his treatment would take longer than anticipated. Although the vet told him not to be bothered, Ethan couldn't help but be worried about the baby lion. He made sure to visit the center every single day, regardless of how busy he was. Of course, Ethan's daily visits yielded a result as the cub gradually recovered. He became more familiar with him. The young man's constant presence made him a friend to the little lion. The cub began to trust Ethan, and the duo fostered a bond that even the animal center staff members were almost jealous of. After 3 weeks, it was finally time for the 2 of them to go home together. As Ethan fed the 2 cubs that morning, he said, "Your brother will be here in a few hours. I'm sure you'll be glad to see him." As he drove to the animal center, he was so impatient he felt as if the road had become longer. After signing the necessary paperwork, Ethan put the cub in the crate he brought from home and placed it in the car. As he drove home happily, Ethan didn't have an inkling of the change that was about to happen. It seemed the 2 cubs were reining in all the action as they waited for the 3rd member of their small pride. After excitedly welcoming their brother, they started coming out of their room more. Although they still slept for about 20 hours daily, they began coming out to meet Ethan in the lounge after each meal. In some instances, they would fall asleep on his chest, and Ethan would just leave them there. He and the 3 cubs became a small family. They watched movies, ran around, and spent their idle time together. But there was something left. Since they'd been with him for over a month, Ethan knew that they were long overdue for names. Despite having cared for animals in his home, he had never had the privilege to name any of them. He knew they would all leave him eventually, and he thought that giving them a name would make him too attached. But since the lions would have to stay with him for a few more months, he would make an exception for them. He checked online for name suggestions, but none of them sounded right enough. Eventually, he named the formerly sick cub Leo and his siblings Mia and Oliver respectively. The little lions soon started showing their true personalities, and Ethan had fun discovering all the little traits that made them unique. Leo was the clingiest of the bunch, while Mia was very bossy with her siblings, and Oliver preferred to spend his time chilling. Ethan was treating them as pets, and in turn, they were treating him as another member of their pride. Then, when they crossed the 2-month line, Dr. Blair called him and asked him to pay a visit. Ethan agreed to meet the veterinary doctor at the center the next day. The doctor informed him that it was time to start introducing raw meat into the cubs' diet. Up until now, he had raised them with milk, just like their mother would have done if she had stayed in their lives. But now it was time to wean them and make them more independent. Of course, he knew the vet was right, so on his way home, Ethan bought meat at a store. From that afternoon, he incorporated meat into their diet. As soon as he started, the 3 lions started growing bigger and stronger by the day. He was proud of them and even prouder of himself for helping them. Things were going smoothly until Ethan was hit with a curveball. As the days passed and the cats grew huge, their paws became stronger. Before, when any of them accidentally scratched Ethan with their paw or nipped him with their teeth, the pain would almost be unnoticeable. However, as they grew, they started exercising their teeth and paws. Ethan noticed that they had scratched the legs of his small dining table. He also discovered fairly deep scratches on other furniture pieces in the living room. This made him change the arrangement of his house, switching the wooden furniture pieces with metal ones. Although it was foreign and quite uncomfortable at first, Ethan got used to the necessary adjustments he had to make. Even though they were lions, Ethan was able to train the cubs to a large extent. Although his friends knew how much he loved animals, they didn't believe him when he said that the 3 cubs in his house were well-behaved and fun to be with. There is no such thing as a well-behaved wild animal, his friends argued. Well, the whole argument ended when they went to his house and saw how playful and charming the cubs were. Months rolled by, and the lion cubs reached the 1-year milestone. Dr. Blair commended Ethan for taking good care of the lions when he took them to the center for their routine checkup. The doctor appreciated the fact that they looked good and were gaining weight as they should. Ethan was also happy that his efforts of giving them a good life paid off. However, both Ethan and the doctor knew that happiness was a short-lived one. As more months rolled by, Ethan's couch became too small for the cubs. It was eventually time for them to move to the animal park. Needless to say, Ethan was hesitant to let go of them as they had become like kids to him. He would have insisted on keeping them had the doctor not told them it was important that they left. They need to get more exposed to their natural habitat, and they need physical activity, the vet said. You can't possibly take them for walks in your neighborhood, but they are getting to the stage where they need it. Their predatory instincts need to be exercised at this stage. He was devastated to hear it, but he knew this was the truth. So he began the preparations to deliver the lions to the animal park. However, on the day Leo, Mia, and Oliver left Ethan's house, he learned something that made his heart soar. Realizing how unhappy Ethan looked, the doctor explained, "The bond you've built with the cubs is stronger than you realize. Lions are smart and recognize people they've befriended even after a very long time. They will always want to be close to you whenever they see you, so you can always visit them whenever you have the time. You'll be amazed at how happy they will be to see you." What the doctor said comforted Ethan a great deal. He decided that he would be a part of the cubs' lives even though they no longer lived with him. Then an unplanned circumstance came up. Just a week after the cubs were moved to the animal park, Ethan had to travel to Africa for work. He was away for more than 6 months. When he came back, he was so eager to see the 3 cubs that he went to the center the exact day he arrived in Mexico. Upon arriving at the animal center, Ethan made a beeline for the lion enclosure. Mia and Oliver were positioned at the farthest end of the section, while Leo's enclosure was the nearest. Consequently, it was no surprise that the other 2 cubs didn't notice Ethan's approach. As soon as Leo spotted him, the young lion's joyful and exuberant reaction drew the attention of onlookers. This young man became a parent to these cubs when they were left motherless. He rescued them after their abandonment and nurtured them in his home for more than a year, an elderly zookeeper recounted to the captivated crowd. Many were visibly moved, tears appearing in their eyes as they watched Ethan unlock Mia and Oliver's cage, holding Leo in his arms. Though they may not reside together any longer, their bonds would eternally keep them as a family. What an incredible story! If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. See you in the next video.